Hey friends, how are you doing today? I hope you're feeling blessed and staying in God's presence, and if not, I hope you feel uplifted after today's video. If you're new here, welcome to His Princess Christian community where we read a chapter of the Bible every day and then discuss it afterwards and in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and it opens the door for more people to join our community. And while you're at it, check out the description box. We got a lot of great stuff in there. So today we're reading Leviticus chapter 25, but before we get started, I want to say a prayer if you wouldn't mind bowing your heads with me. Dear God, thank you for bringing us together here on His Princess Christian community. Thank you for opening the door for people to join our community, for connecting us and strengthening our bond. Thank you for opening our eyes, our ears, our hearts, and our minds to your word. Thank you for your wisdom, understanding, and clarity as we seek to interpret your word. And thank you for the courage to apply it to our daily lives. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, Leviticus chapter 25. While Moses was on Mount Sinai, the Lord said to him, "Give the following instructions to the people of Israel. When you have entered the land I am giving you, the land itself must observe a Sabbath rest before the Lord every 7th year. For 6 years you may plant your fields and prune your vineyards and harvest your crops, but during the 7th year the land must have a Sabbath year of complete rest. It is the Lord's Sabbath. Do not plant your fields or prune your vineyards during that year. And don't store away the crops that grow on their own, or gather the grapes from your unpruned vines. The land must have a year of complete rest, but you may eat whatever the land produces on its own during its Sabbath. This applies to you, your male and female servants, your hired workers, and the temporary residents who live with you. Your livestock and the wild animals in your land will also be allowed to eat what the land produces. In addition, you must count off seven Sabbath years, 7 sets of 7. You must count off 7 Sabbath years, 7 sets of 7 years, adding up to 49 years in all. Then on the Day of Atonement in the 50th year, blow the ram's horn loud and long throughout the land. Set this year apart as holy, a time to proclaim freedom throughout the land for all who live there. It will be a Jubilee year for you, when each of you may return to the land that belonged to your ancestors and return to your own clan. This 50th year will be a Jubilee for you. During that year you must not plant your fields or store away any of the crops that grow on their own, and don't gather the grapes from your unpruned vines. It will be a Jubilee year for you, and you must keep it holy. But you may eat whatever the land produces on its own. In the year of Jubilee, each of you may return to the land that belonged to your ancestors. When you make an agreement with your neighbor to buy or sell property, you must not take advantage of each other. When you buy land from your neighbor, the price you pay must be based on the number of years since the last Jubilee. The seller must set the price by taking into account the number of years remaining until the next year of Jubilee. The more years until the next Jubilee, the higher the price. The fewer years, the lower the price. After all, the person selling the land is actually selling you a certain number of harvests. Show your fear of God by not taking advantage of each other. I am the Lord your God. If you want to live securely in the land, follow my decrees and obey my regulations. Then the land will yield large crops, and you will eat your fill and live securely in it. But you might ask, what will we eat during the 7th year, since we are not allowed to plant or harvest crops that year? Be assured that I will send my blessings for you in the 6th year, so the land will produce a crop large enough for 3 years. When you plant your fields in the 8th year, you will still be eating from the large crop of the 6th year. In fact, you will still be eating from that large crop when the new crop is harvested in the 9th year. The land must never be sold on a permanent basis, for the land belongs to me. You are only foreigners and tenant farmers working for me. With every purchase of land, you must grant the seller the right to buy it back. If one of your fellow Israelites falls into poverty and is forced to sell some family land, then a close relative should buy it back for him. If there is no close relative to buy the land, but the person who sold it gets enough money to buy it back, he then has the right to redeem it from the one who bought it. The price of the land will be discounted according to the number of years until the next year of Jubilee. In this way, the original owner can then return to the land. But if the original owner cannot afford to buy back the land, it will remain with the new owner until the next year of Jubilee. In the Jubilee year, the land must be returned to the original owner so they can return to their family land. Anyone who sells a house inside a walled town has the right to buy it back for a full year after its sale. During that year, the seller retains the right to buy it back. But if it is not bought back within a year, the sale of the house within the walled town cannot be reserved. It will become the permanent property of the buyer. It will not be returned to the original owner in the year of Jubilee, but a house in a village, a settlement without fortified walls, will be treated like property in the countryside. Such a house may be bought back at any time, and it must be returned to the original owner in the year of Jubilee. The Levites always have the right to buy back a house they have sold within the towns allotted to them. And any property that is sold by the Levites, all the houses within the Levitical towns must be returned in the year of Jubilee. After all, the houses in the towns reserved for the Levites are only property they own in all of Israel. The open pasture land around the Levitical towns may never be sold. It is their permanent possession. If one of your fellow Israelites falls into poverty, and cannot support himself, support him as you would a foreigner or a temporary resident, and allow him to live with you. Do not charge interest or make a profit at his expense. Instead, show your fear of God by letting him live with you as your relative. Remember, do not charge interest on money you lend him or make a profit on the food you sell him. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your God. If one of your fellow Israelites falls into poverty and is forced to sell himself to you, do not treat him as a slave. Treat him instead as a hired worker or a temporary resident who lives with you, and he will serve you only until the year of Jubilee. At that time, he and his children will no longer be obligated to you, and they will return to their clans and go back to the land originally allotted to their ancestors. The people of Israel are my servants, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt, so they must never be sold as slaves. Show your fear of God by not treating them harshly. However, you may purchase male and female slaves from among the nations around you. You may also purchase the children of temporary residents who live among you, including those who have been born in your land. You may treat them as your property, passing them on to your children as a permanent inheritance. You may treat them as slaves, but you must never treat your fellow Israelites this way. Suppose a foreigner or a temporary resident becomes rich while living among you. If any of your fellow Israelites falls into poverty and are forced to sell themselves to such a foreigner or to a member of his family, they still retain the right to be brought back even after they have been purchased. They may be brought back by a brother, an uncle, or a cousin. In fact, anyone from the extended family may buy them back. They may also redeem themselves if they have prospered. They will negotiate the price of their freedom with the person who bought them. The price will be based on the number of years from the time they were sold until the next year of Jubilee, whatever it would cost to hire a worker for the period of time. If many years still remain until the Jubilee, they will repay the proper proportion of what they received when they sold themselves. If only a few years remain until the year of Jubilee, they will repay a small amount for their redemption. The foreigner must treat them as workers hired on a yearly basis. You must not allow a foreigner to treat any of your fellow Israelites harshly. If any Israelite have not been bought back by the time the year of Jubilee arrives, they and their children must be set free at that time, for the people of Israel belong to me. They are my servants whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Amen. So what did you think of Leviticus chapter 25? I'm interested to hear about it in the comments below. Let me know what your insights or interpretations were on the chapter. Maybe comment your favorite verse, or just say hi and let us know that you're part of the community. And if you've been blessed lately, let us know so that we can rejoice with you. And if you need prayer, make sure you're putting that in the comments too, so we can pray together as a community. Okay, so Leviticus chapter 25 starts off talking about the Sabbath year. And it's reminding us that the Sabbath isn't just for people to refrain from ordinary work, but it's also to give the land and the animals a break. So it says the land itself must observe a Sabbath rest before the Lord every 7th year. So, and it says, do not plant your fields or prune your vineyards during that year. Do not store away any crops that grow on their own, or gather the grapes from your unpruned vines. But you may eat whatever the land produces. So you can't store or keep anything that it produces, but you can eat anything that it produces. So it kind of reminded me of the manna in the wilderness, how they were able to eat whatever fell, but they couldn't keep it till the next day, because you had to trust that it would be enough, that God would provide enough. So he's saying do not store. Then the next section is about the year of the Jubilee. And so it's saying you're supposed to count off 7 sets of 7 years and adding up to 49 years altogether. And then the Day of Atonement on the 50th year, that's the year of Jubilee. And this is a very important time, kind of redemption for the Israelites. So it says this is a time to proclaim freedom throughout the land. And it says that the 50th year will be a jubilee for you. During that year, you must not plant plant your fields or store away any of the crops that grow on your land, and do not gather grapes from your unpruned vine. And you can return to your land. So this is a time again of complete rest for the land and the animals. And this is another time where you can't store up anything that is produced. It's just like a regular Sabbath year. However, there's a reminder not to take advantage of people. So this is a reminder for freedom and redemption. So during this year, anyone who is enslaved must be set free. Anyone who has debts should be forgiven. And then it's also a reminder not to take advantage of people as the Jubilee approaches. So, for instance, some people may want to take out a huge debt right before Jubilee just so that it can get forgiven. And so this is a reminder not to take advantage of this gift of redemption and freedom. Unfortunately, humans are horrible and they'll use that as an advantage. So it's a reminder that says when you buy land from your neighbor, the price you pay must be based on the number of years since the last Jubilee. So the more years until the next Jubilee, the higher the price. And the fewer years, the lower the price. And it's just a reminder that you should fear God and not take advantage of people, because God will avenge the person. And he's saying, if you want to live securely in the land, obey my regulations. And I love in verse 21, it says, be assured that I will send my blessing for you in the 6th year. So the land will produce a crop large enough for 3 years. So although it's only taking a year off, it'll be large enough for 3 years. And it says you will still be eating from that large crop when the new crop is harvested in the 9th year. And call that abundance, like the abundance of God, to say that you can just live in that security and that freedom and knowing that God is going to take care of you and provide. And see, me, I have anxiety. So while I know that God is going to provide and take care of me, I still have that anxiety about that whole year. Like, okay, what's going to happen and what am I going to do? I'd rather just not have to think about it and have, the storehouse full, like, instead of having to just worry about it, even though I know that God is going to take care of it and provide. I can't control the way my mind is and the way my mind goes. So I still worry and get concerned, but God is saying that he is going to provide, and we have to trust in that, and not let the enemy, steal that from you and send you into a mode of lack or not having enough. And then again, we get back into the redemption of property, and it says, grant the seller the right to buy it back. So it says, the land must never be sold on a permanent basis. And this is something like trusting in God too, because if you sell your land because maybe you're going on hard times, and then somebody else comes and buys it, you just have to realize that that nothing is really yours. It's just another reminder that everything belongs to God. It doesn't belong to you. We're just, like he said, tenants and farmers, tenders of the land. And so to realize that this is never really yours, it can be taken at any time. So don't get too comfortable. And I just, I think that idea is so great. But again, me having anxiety like I do, my mind is always going half a mile a minute. I'd be in there like, well, don't worry about painting the walls because they might come back tomorrow and buy this and try to get this house back. So, I could just see how I would live through that, and just not wanting to put down roots, because you would just never know when somebody was going to come back and snatch back, what you have. So it says you have to grant the seller the right to buy it back. And it says that the person who sold it gets enough money to buy it back. It says if if there is no close relative to buy back the land, the person who sold it, but the person who sold it gets enough money to buy it back, then he has the right to redeem it. And it says, but if the original owner cannot afford to buy back the land, it will remain with the new owner until the next year of Jubilee. So basically, like, if the person who sold the land wants their land back, they can't afford it, then you still have to give it back at the year of Jubilee, even if you don't have, even if they don't have any money to pay for it. So again, it goes back to where it's saying the price of the house having to do with the amount of time until Jubilee, because they can come and get it back. So it's really just you're renting it from that person, instead of actually buying it, you're leasing it. Because they can always come and take it back at Jubilee. So then it's saying that if anyone who sells a house inside a walled town only has a year, so if it's not just an open village, but if it's walled, then the person only has a year to come to claim that house within inside the walled town. The Levites, however, have the right to buy back a house they've sold within the town allotted to them. So the Levites have any amount of time to buy it back. It says it must be returned in the year of Jubilee. And then open pasture lands around Levitical towns may never be sold. That's a permanent possession, that was given by God. Then the redemption of the poor and enslaved. So this anytime we talk about slavery in the Bible, it's a touchy subject. But it starts off talking about Israelites and the difference between Israelites and everyone else. So Israelites, they said they may never be treated like a slave. If they fall into poverty, they're supposed to be treated like a hired worker, and you're not supposed to take advantage of them or charge them interest on anything or make a profit at their expense. And then you have to free them at the year of Jubilee. But however, if you have, you may purchase, this is the part that I don't like, you may purchase male and female slaves from among the nations around you, and you may treat them as your property. And when I'm reading this, I'm reminded the difference between the Israelites and everyone else. Everyone else was pagan and following, not following God, and I feel like that the people that followed God weren't treated this way. And however, in the New Testament, Jesus opened up that door to where everyone gets that equal treatment from God if they want it, if they receive the sacrifice that Jesus made. And it's another reminder that if a foreigner purchases an Israelite, they still have to free them in the year of Jubilee. And they can also be purchased back. They can't treat them as property, because God is saying they are my people. It says, they are my servants whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So you better not be treating the Israelites harshly. And I think that this is just another reminder about the distinction between God's children and those who are not. That God makes a distinction between his people and those people who are not his. So that is my interpretation of Leviticus chapter 25. I'm interested to hear what you have to say about it. Leave it in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope you stay blessed, stay in God's presence, and have a great rest of your day. I love you.